What's a good word, y'all? DKB here. So I got a fun one today. I wanted to review a roster projection that was done by another person in Robby Sabo that just got released, I want to say earlier today, if it wasn't late last night. But irregardless, let's go ahead and dive into it because there's a lot of interesting stuff that's going on. So in the quarterback room, there's no major changes. Really, the highlight here is that we have Mike White projected to be our number 2 quarterback. And really, Joe Flacco and Mike White's role is kind of interchangeable at this point. If it comes to playing right away, it seems like the ideal here is that Mike White, given his recent performances, can step in and do more than just an admirable job if, for whatever reason, Zach Wilson misses some time and Joe Flacco just ends up playing like the elder, spokesman type role when it comes to filling in some of the gaps, giving a different perspective to some of the things that Zach Wilson and or Mike White, if he sees the field, maybe seeing against some of these other opponents, especially those that he may have further in-depth, behind the scenes knowledge on due to his vast experience. So nothing crazy there. The running back room, I think, is one of our first surprises. So Robby Sabo only projects us going into the NFL season with 3 running backs. And the names are pretty obvious. Michael Carter is our 1. Breece Hall is our 2. Tevin Coleman is rounding out the 3rd slot. And he basically advises here that Michael Carter has the edge due to playing his rookie season. He has the experience behind him. And let's not forget, he was just ranked the number 3 or 3rd most elusive running back in the NFL last season as a rookie on a 4.3 yard per carry average. So given the fact that the offensive line wasn't performing as well as it could have been, but still was trending towards a great direction, he really facilitated a lot of that on his own. So we don't expect any diminished returns here. Another season, or at least a off-season, true NFL off-season, and better understanding of the NFL offense, as well as how he can attack some of these defenses, puts him in the driver's seat. Now, he probably won't be that way all season, but irregardless, Breece Hall will still get his touches for sure. And then Tevin Coleman is rounding out things, essentially playing the running back room's Joe Flacco role, where he'll kind of be the spokesman, giving sound advice to some of the rookies in certain situations. And then, of course, we know that he can go out there and essentially be our receiving threat without having to necessarily wear out his legs and his body too much. In this situation, Ty Johnson and Michael P. Ryan don't make the cut. And then Zonovan Knight ends up being stashed on the practice squad if we can get him past wires. I don't foresee this being the case. I really do think we need to go into the season with 4 running backs, especially since we are expecting to have more of an emphasis in the running game. That's going to be that many more hits that Michael Carter and Breece Hall are going to have to absorb. And you want to be able to spread the love a little bit, which is all of what Mike LaFleur's offense is about with this running scheme. So if I had to slide a 4th in there, personally, I'm going to go with the product that's a little bit more unknown but can help us in a few different areas in Zonovan Knight. In the wide receiver room, we only carry 5 wide receivers. Elijah Moore is being considered the number 1. Corey Davis is the 2. Braxton Berrios in the slot. And then we have Garrett Wilson as the 4th and Jeff Smith rounding out the 5th spot. So this is where things start to get really interesting. Obviously, we left out Denzel Mims from that list. In this situation, Sabo thinks that we end up picking up a mid-round pick for Denzel Mims some point during training camp. And then we end up cutting DJ Montgomery. Some of the UDFAs like Irvin Charles don't make it here, although we think they can go on a practice squad. And same with Tariq Black. Now, a lot of what we're going to see here is the fact that we have a lot of multi-dimensional prospects in our wide receiver room. I mean, Elijah Moore can play in the slot. He can play outside as well. Corey Davis has played in the slot, but we know he can also play outside. Braxton Berrios is essentially the only pure slot receiver guy that we have, but he also has a role in being able to do effectively a lot of these gadget plays that we like to run, as well as being an all-pro returner for us. And then Garrett Wilson, the rookie, we know he's most recently played quite a bit in the slot, but he has the route running skills and the ability to get open on the outside. And then Jeff Smith has been kind of having a revelation of an offseason, at least during OTA so far. So we'll see if he continues to trend, that same trend once we get pads on. But it really sounds like he's primed for quote unquote a breakout season for whatever that will look like as a fifth prospect in a rotation. But all of these guys essentially have inside-outside duality outside of Braxton Berrios, and we know Mike LaFleur, again, in the running game, he likes to spread the love. In the wide receiver room, he likes variety. He likes being able to go out there and, a defense not being able to predict exactly what's going to happen on every given play just because of an alignment. So, I would be ecstatic with this particular lineup. Obviously, I would love to see Denzel Mims on here, but if we don't end up carrying a six, right now I would have to prefer Jess Smith over Denzel Mims unless training camp works itself out a little bit differently. But again, Denzel Mims is, Jeff Smith's trump card is that he has that special teams ability, whereas Denzel Mims, at least for this roster, we're not going to stash him as a sixth wide receiver or even a fifth, and we don't even really have him see the field on, most game days. So not much of a surprise there, but it is what it is. The tight end fullback room is what really kind of shocked me a little bit. CJ Uzoma ends up being the number one for us, with Tyler Conklin being number two, also having some fullback ability. And then Nick Baldwin as the true fullback, Kenny Yeboah, and Jeremy Rucker. So we essentially keep the entire tight end room that we currently have after the remake. And then Nick Baldwin's going to end up being the true fullback, with Tyler Conklin essentially kind of being his backup just based on his ability. And that's only if he truly ends up being a number two. You can also kind of say that CJ Uzoma would also be able to have some of that fullback potential. But in this situation, I don't think there's a whole lot to necessarily be disappointed about. It's really a matter of, do you prefer Kenny Yeboah and what he can offer in the receiving game, or do you prefer Lawrence Cager, who was, put out there as having a phenomenal offseason in his own 2 to 3 catches a day in practice, obviously showing up in pretty much peak form after transferring from wide receiver to tight end. In this situation, Lawrence Cager kind of gets the Denzel Mims treatment a bit, where Kenny Yeboah was one of our top-ranked special teams players. So, how much are we going to align ourselves with Brian Boyer and making sure he still feels he has what he needs to keep things in, peak form for his unit as well. Trayvon Wesco is the only other person that gets cut, and I think if this line works out the way it does, both offensive line as well as the lineup we have in the tight end room, we won't miss him. It really won't be much of a noticeable thing at all. Now on the offensive line, going to the tackle situation, there's nothing crazy here. Chuma Edoga gets the cut. There's plenty of the camp body players, Greg Senat, Grant Hermans, Parker Ferguson, that are essentially going to be practice squad candidates. Nothing crazy there. Chuma Edoga getting the cut really just depends on what we think about Max Mitchell, and does Chuma Edoga outperform Connor McDermott, who can also play on the interior of the offensive line if there was an emergency to go down. So he just kind of gets beat out by versatility. But again, we'll see. A strong training camp can definitely swing a lot of these things certain ways. On the interior, Elijah Vera Tucker makes it. Obviously, Tomlinson, McGovern at center, and then Nate Herbig, who we just brought over, and Dan Feeney round things out. And it's, again, the name of the game is really versatility here. There's not going to be any crazy names that anybody's familiar with. Derek Kelly gets a cut. Drew Samia and Rosh Pierschbacher, who we've actually had hanging around for quite a few seasons now, ends up going back to the practice squad or getting cut. Now, for the defensive side, and I think this is what we all are particularly wanting to pay attention to, we have Quentin Williams on the line for the interior. Obviously, it's the one. John Franklin Myers right after him. Sheldon Rankin, Solomon Thomas, and then Nathan Shepard. So, if you guys notice, there's a few names out there that didn't quite make it or will not make it. But at least for this interior, Jonathan Marshall is the big one. Now, the way things work out, Jonathan Marshall is still essentially an unknown product. Handful of snaps last season, just under about 100. And we're talking about players that we've at least seen perform and also kind of have somewhat of a body structure that may be able to hold up on the interior side. Quentin Williams is predicted to kind of play the true nose tackle role for us in this defense, which will be interesting if we really don't find another man in the rotation that we feel can purely fill that actual role of lining up directly over the nose tackle. But I'm not particularly upset about this. Jonathan Marshall, I don't know if he makes it past the waiver wire to get on the practice squad, which I think will be the miss. And so I ideally would want to slot him above Nathan Shepard. If not, I think Solomon Thomas actually needs to be bumped a little bit lower. He's really been porous, and he's really came over just because he knows this Robert Saleh defense. Will that contribute to him racking up anything on the stat sheet? I don't really think so. And so you kind of have a product that you know about that's a very low performer, but a high quality, personnel guy in the locker room. And then you have Jonathan Marshall, who I would assume is high quality character. And then he's the unknown, but he's the guy with elite measurables and all the things that you will want. So I would say just give him the chance and let him see if he can break out. But another situation that may work itself out during training camp, maybe he can find a way to force their hand in carrying 6 on the inside rather than 5. But either way, it's a tough decision. For the edge, obviously we have Carl Lawson out there. We're going to have Bryce Huff, Jacob Martin, Jermaine Johnson, and then Michael Clemens. And in this case, Robby Sabo kind of breaks down. He doesn't even necessarily think Michael Clemens is a clear guy to make it if they don't consider his rookie status as making him like a secure pick. Outside of that ends up meaning that we have to let Vinny Curry go, Tim Ward, and Jabari Zuniga. Some other players that don't really make it that have kind of been running through preseasons, at least in the past. It was Hamilcar Rashed Jr. He's a guy that I really like. Jabari Zuniga, we're kind of hoping maybe makes a practice squad, but he's been a disappointment as one of those early Joe Douglas picks. And then Bradley Anai, we haven't really heard anything about him since we picked him up off of wires. We thought it could really be a sneaky good pickup for us as a high upside player that maybe just couldn't work itself out in Cowboys land basically over there. But irregardless, the defensive line is going to be the hardest decision that, Robert Saleh is going to have to make, because whoever they cut, there's going to be quite a few of us that are going to be disappointed. One way or the other, we're going to think it's a ridiculous move. And I think the question is going to be, do we continue kind of this youth movement or do we sacrifice a little bit of the youth for some of these players that have this playoff experience and expectations that maybe can infuse this roster? In the linebacker room, though, it's probably one of the other surprises that are going to come up here. CJ Mosley, Quincy Williams are our starters. Marcel Harris ends up locking down that third spot. He was the former 49ers pickup, another safety convert that Robert Sabo was able to bring over this offseason. And then Jamian Sherwood rounding things out, and Del'Shawn Phillips, who looked pretty good in kind of spot duties. So the tough cut here is Hamza Nasruddin. He's a guy that doesn't make it over Jamian Sherwood, even though he has the better measurables and all the things that we're looking for. They both lost time due to injury. Prior to the injury, though, Jamian Sherwood was already making a name for himself as somebody that was picking up, the minute details of the defense and able to communicate at a high level right away. So when CJ Mosley originally went down, it was Jamian Sherwood they selected to kind of man the spot, and then he went down with an injury very quick. So it'll be interesting to see if that comes to fruition, and Hamza Nasruddin's a guy who may not crack the rotation here, especially considering you still have Del'Shawn Phillips that's in the wings, that maybe he can beat out, or at least the long-term prospects look a little bit better. And then DQ Thomas, who we brought over, we gave one of the larger UDFA contracts to bring him in. I think it was about $120,000. And it's a guy that we think could be another one of those sneaky good, additions for us in terms of what we're looking for. The lateral ability on the field. He can offer a little bit of a pop, but basically he's bringing the athletic attributes, and then Robert Saleh's hoping to essentially coach those up and give him the techniques to excel here, much like he did with the 49ers. And then in the cornerback room, I really don't predict anything crazy here. We have Sauce Gardner at the top, DJ Reed, Michael Carter II, Bryce Hall, Javelin Guidry, and then Brandon Echols. So really, a lot of the cuts are players that I've already spoken about before, or guys that I suspected could be traded. So Justin Hardy being the big one, kind of purely that special teams guy. Do we find a creative way of working out the roster where we're not missing another key area in order to make room for him? I can't really see it, especially given this exercise, right? What Robby Sabo here went through, Robby Sabo, what he went through here with this exercise is really tough to see us bringing on Justin Hardy, and he's not even going to see the field. He hasn't seen the field for even 5 snaps last season, or I think it was 10. Maybe he was on the field for 7. And actually, now that I think about it, I think the number was 1. He saw the field for 1 exact snap. But either way, that's hard to justify. And then Isaiah Dunn, the former UDFA, again, one of the larger contracts, if not the largest that we gave out. And in this case, he's just a casualty of the numbers game. There's a lot of high-quality performers that we brought in and guys that were able to demonstrate an ability to excel in his defense quicker than he was able to. And then Rashad Wildgoose was another guy who's kind of stood out in off-season practices. Injuries have taken a toll on his ability to keep it up throughout the entire offseason. And again, do we really think that any of these guys in the worst-case scenario beats out Brandon Echols? And again, a lot of these guys outside of Bryce Hall here, and maybe Javelin Guidry, can play both positions. Sauce Gardner might be strictly a boundary guy too, but there's a lot of ability to manipulate where these guys are going to line up and give us ability to kind of play chess there. And then the only other thing to note, at least for the safety position, is going to be that we only carry 4. So Jordan Whitehead, Jason Pinnock, Ashton Davis, and Elijah Riley. The big news is LaMarcus Joyner doesn't make the cut, and that is really going to be dependent on the youth movement. Does Elijah Riley and what he offered last season outplay what LaMarcus Joyner has done at free safety? Which, keep in mind, I called out before, his best season that he's had in the pros was at free safety, and we just didn't really get a chance to see that before the injury last year. So that'll be an interesting thing to see. And then Will Parks is the other guy, in addition to Tony Adams, who we think could excel, but again, is really a numbers game. Personally, I think Elijah Riley, if we're going to go that route, can be interchangeable with any of these other guys, maybe more so than Ashton Davis is. Davis is kind of more so the pure free safety on the team. It's just a matter of if he can piece things together in this offseason, which it looks like he's been finally turning a corner. And then the final thing would be our special teams. Nothing crazy here other than we predict Greg Zerline to win the battle over Eddie Pinero. If nothing else, then for the contract that he was offered. And then, of course, the fact that he has, the huge leg and the experience in big games. But I would actually go Eddie Pinero. I think that was a major pickup for us, and he was in a high-pressure situation to perform, especially knowing the previous Jets history and this crazy rotation of kickers that we've had in recent memory. So I would go Eddie Pinero, seeing that he's performed. But, Brad Boyer did mention the kicking battle up to date has been very 50-50, essentially. They haven't leaned one way or the other. So I really think we will give it up until the final preseason game to really determine who ends up winning that battle purely based off the kicking ability then, which would probably be a smart move. There's really no reason to rush who can potentially win that kicking battle. But let me know what your guys' thoughts are. There's definitely a lot of call-outs in terms of the names here that maybe will end up going to the practice squad or end up being a surprise cut, in my opinion. Also, some of the depth chart orders are a little interesting. But let me know if you guys have anybody else that you think should be cut over some of these other players or any other interesting twists to the rosters that you guys have. I'll be interested to see if you guys have your own versions of a depth chart for me. But I will let you guys go with that. There's a lot of info covered, but I'm looking forward to seeing all this stuff. So I'll see you guys again. Peace.